When I was 15 and just starting junior year, I created my first Twitter account, which I later deleted due to a frightening experience. I kept my username private, shared it with no one, and used an avatar for my profile picture. I listed Paris as my location, although I lived in the suburbs. With only a few followers and following only a handful of people, my timeline was quite dull. One evening in October, I received a strange direct message from an account with about 200 followers. The message inquired whether I lived in the town I actually resided in, as the sender was moving there soon and looking for friends. The sender's name was Rob, and he claimed to be 17. This information unsettled me because I hadn't mentioned my location on my profile, but I recalled a tweet from weeks earlier where I had mentioned the city. I concluded that Rob must have found my tweet and reached out based on that. His age wasn't surprising given my own age difference with classmates. I decided to respond since Rob was polite and I was bored. Our initial conversation was about school life, discussing high school, cafeteria food, and teachers. However, as the conversation progressed, Rob started asking more personal questions about my home and family. These questions felt intrusive, so I chose not to answer them. Despite his probing, he did not press further. Our communication continued and Rob's personal questions persisted. I also asked him questions, and his responses seemed genuine. Over time, I developed feelings for him. He was attractive and kind, which was significant for me as I had been bullied for years. I often formed strong, sometimes blind, trust in those who showed me kindness. In France, October includes a 2-week vacation, and before school resumed, Rob informed me he had moved in with his mother and would be attending my high school. He proposed meeting during the morning break. I agreed to meet him in the 3rd-floor bathroom, a secluded place where we wouldn't be disturbed, despite the fact that it was off-limits during breaks. The next day, I made an effort to look nice and eagerly awaited the break. When Rob arrived, he resembled his profile picture but appeared older than his stated age. We got along well, and after the break, Rob suggested going to a fast food place for lunch, which I declined due to my principle of not letting others pay for me. He then offered to walk me home after school, which I accepted with the condition that he could walk me to the bus stop. This routine continued, meeting in the bathroom during breaks and Rob walking me to the bus stop after school. Strangely, I never saw him in the hallways or cafeteria. I assumed our schedules didn't overlap due to the school size and the large number of students. The routine lasted until December 14th. That day, I expressed how lonely I would be in the evening because my family members were away. Rob walked me to the bus stop that evening, and after I boarded, I experienced a sudden, unsettling sensation. It was dark outside, and as I got off at my stop, I felt as though someone was watching me. I kept my earphones in, but paused the music to listen for footsteps. I realized I was being followed. I quietly retrieved my keys and ran as fast as I could, managing to get inside and lock the door before the follower could reach me. Once inside, I deactivated the alarm, confirming that I was alone, and looked through the glass panel on the door. It was Rob standing outside, watching me with a disturbing expression. I was paralyzed and didn't call the police. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. I eventually retrieved a knife from the kitchen and returned to the door, where Rob continued to bang and kick. The tension was intense as I struggled to keep the door closed. After what seemed like 5 minutes, Rob stopped and began pounding on the house's shutters before returning to the door. He appeared enraged, but fled when he saw my neighbor's car arrive, likely mistaking it for my mother's. Rob then sent me numerous messages on Twitter before I could block him, and subsequently deleted his account. Despite this, new accounts with names similar to his began following me, sending a barrage of insulting messages. I deleted my account to escape the harassment. Later, I spoke with people who were supposed to be Rob's classmates, but no one had heard of him. He was not a student at my high school. I remain uncertain about his motives and what might have happened if my neighbor had not arrived. I still wonder what he wanted and what could have occurred that night. I grew up moving around a lot. By the time I started freshman year of high school, I had already moved about 7 times. I had settled into my most recent home for a year and a half, and I was lucky to find a close group of friends in middle school. We all went to high school together. I met Sam through one of these friends. He was a few years older than us, but he fit right in. Sam was large and imposing, easily twice my size. Though I wasn't generally intimidated by big men, Sam had a way of making me feel uneasy. My home life wasn't great, so I spent as much time as possible at school. Sometimes I would hang out on campus until late in the evening with my friends. 3 of us lived in the same direction, so we would walk home together. One chilly evening, Sam offered to walk me home since the others had already left. He mentioned a troubling event from his past in California, where he didn't walk a friend home and something terrible happened. He left it at that, and I let him walk me home. We grew closer after that. We bonded over our shared experience of living in California and exchanged numbers. Sam began sending me late-night messages about his struggles with depression and self-harm. I wanted to be there for him. A few months later, he made a big romantic gesture by learning a Disney song on the ukulele and singing it to me in the cafeteria. I was already dating someone, and when I turned him down, he reacted angrily. His anger was quiet and unsettling, and it left me feeling uneasy. Soon I started seeing him everywhere. We were still friends and hung out in groups, but I would notice him following me on the street. Whenever I walked somewhere, he seemed to change direction and follow me. During passing periods, he would trail behind me from a distance. I started minimizing group time and arranged for friends to walk with me between classes because I felt unsafe. Sam knew where I lived. Then, things took a darker turn. Sam began talking to mutual friends about a girl in California whom he had tried to walk home. At first, it seemed like a coincidence that she shared my name, but as he talked more, the story started to resemble my own life. He described her as having brown curly hair and blue eyes, just like me. According to him, this girl had died tragically on her birthday, January 24th, which was also my birthday. In his retelling, she bled out in his arms after being attacked in a robbery gone wrong. The details kept changing, and the story became more horrific. It seemed like he had a twisted fantasy about my death and knew where I lived. My boyfriend, who was abusive, became a source of security for me. I stayed close to him whenever possible because I knew he could protect me if needed. I felt unsafe both at school and walking home from school in the dark. One day, Sam had a breakdown at school. He ran out in a panic, and I was sent after him. I found him curled up on the floor. Despite my fears, I wanted to make sure he was okay. He then told me a horrifying story that matched the details I had been hearing from friends. He said that in California, we were walking home from a concert when a homeless man with a rusty knife attacked us in a dark alley. I fumbled for my phone, but he thought I was calling the police. He stabbed me repeatedly while Sam watched in horror. In his rage, Sam grabbed a broken glass bottle and killed the attacker with his own knife. Sam claimed he had killed someone. At that point, it didn't matter if his story was true or just a fantasy. I was terrified and wanted to go to the police. My friends convinced me to talk to the school counselor first. We went to her and explained everything: the stalking, the disturbing stories, his confession of murder, and my fear for my safety. The counselor didn't take us seriously. She spoke to the principal, who called Sam in for a discussion. The principal decided that Sam didn't have a mental illness and that I was not in danger. Disheartened, I lost faith in adults and gave up on contacting the police. I stayed close to my friend during classes, relied on my abusive boyfriend for protection, and remained vigilant while walking home. The counselors eventually gaslit us to the point where everything felt like a nightmare. I started to doubt my own memories, but my journal entries and the consistent stories from my friends kept the reality of the situation clear. I now believe that no one actually died in California. Sam seems to be a pathological liar, lost in his own delusions. Though I wasn't physically hurt, the emotional impact and the real threat he posed were undeniable. Let me tell you about something that happened to me in ninth grade. I was around 13 or 14 at the time, and I had zero friends. I was kinda quirky, which made it tough for me to fit in. I didn't want to change who I was just to blend in, so making friends was a real struggle. During the second week of school, I met a guy named Alex in my English class. Our teacher had us sit together, and we struck up a conversation. Alex was really friendly, and we had a lot in common. He'd come from a different elementary school, which was unusual since most kids from his old school went to a different high school. He said he chose our school because it offered classes that the other school didn't. A week later, Alex asked if I wanted to have lunch with him. He'd noticed that I usually ate alone, and I thought it was a kind gesture, so I agreed. We started eating lunch together, but I soon made some new friends. I invited Alex to join us, but he always declined. Then one day in English class, he passed me a note. It was odd since we were sitting right next to each other. The note said something like, "I need to talk to you. Can we sit alone together for lunch?" I replied that I would, and we barely spoke for the rest of the period. I started getting a weird vibe from him. When lunchtime came, I saw him sitting at the end of a row of long harvest tables in the cafeteria. He asked if we could go outside to talk. I agreed, curious about what was going on. Once we were outside, he led me to a curb in front of the school and started talking aggressively. He said it was unfair for me to make new friends after he had been the first to befriend me. He insisted that because he had eaten lunch with me when I was alone, I was now obligated to sit with him. It was a strange conversation. I suggested he could join me and my friends, where he could also meet new people. I told him I had plenty of friendship to go around, and that he shouldn't be upset. But his reaction was shocking. He grabbed my arm and said, "You owe me this, you will sit with me." I was scared and just wanted to get away, so I agreed to sit with him alone every other day. I was eager to return to a place where more people were around. After that day, I started receiving unsettling emails. The first one said, "All women are Satan. The devil lives in you all." I didn't recognize the email address and figured it was just a prank. But the emails kept coming, all with similar messages about women being the devil. I showed these emails to my friends, who thought it was just someone trying to scare people. But my friend Lisa mentioned that she'd heard stories about Alex from his old school. Apparently, he had been obsessed with a girl there, and her mother had even gotten a restraining order against him. I didn't believe it at first, but I started to worry. I kept having lunch with Alex on alternate days, trying to keep things friendly while distancing myself. Then, after Christmas break, our schedules changed. I was relieved because I'd have a different lunch period and wouldn't see him in English anymore. I thought I could finally distance myself from him. But Alex started leaving notes in my locker, declaring his love and saying we were meant to take over the world together. I appreciated the sentiment, but I didn't share his feelings. I told him that he was overwhelming me and that I needed some space. He seemed to understand and agreed to give me some distance. However, this lasted only a couple of days before the emails became even more threatening. They included threats to my life and claimed to know where I lived and went to school. Terrified, I finally told my mom. She called the police, who investigated and found out that Alex was behind the emails. The school was informed, and Alex was suspended. I felt a huge sense of relief. A year after we graduated, I learned that Alex and his mother had gone for a drive. During the drive, he attacked her and stabbed her over 100 times. He had a psychotic break, and when the police found him, he claimed it was an accident. When questioned about the stab wounds, he admitted to killing her to release the devil from her soul. He pleaded insanity and was found not criminally responsible for her murder. That's the story. It's still hard to believe how things unfolded, but I guess it's a reminder of how unpredictable people can be. During my freshman year of high school, I was known for being friendly and approachable. I made it a point to reach out to anyone who seemed alone, always eager to make new friends and help others feel welcome. It was part of who I was, always looking out for the underdogs, the new kids, and anyone who might need a friend. One day, a new student joined our math class. Let's call him Leo. Leo had just moved from a distant country and didn't speak much English. Since I spoke Spanish fluently, I decided to introduce myself and offer my help. I approached him with a smile and spoke to him in Spanish. His eyes lit up with relief, and he seemed genuinely grateful to find someone who could communicate with him. We quickly became friends, and I helped him with his assignments and understanding the class material. Leo quickly became a regular in our class, but always chose to sit alone. He was shy and didn't interact much with others. I noticed he struggled with the math problems, so I made it a point to assist him whenever I could. He sat behind me, and I began to notice something unusual. Leo would occasionally touch my hair. It was a light touch, barely noticeable at first. I didn't think much of it. He was decent looking, so I figured he might have a small crush on me, but it didn't really bother me. I assumed he was just a bit awkward and didn't think much of the touches. As the weeks went by, Leo's habit continued. He would lightly brush my hair while I was working on my assignments or during class. He often complimented my hair, saying he liked it a lot. At first, I just brushed it off as part of his shyness or maybe a cultural difference. By the end of the second month, Leo suggested we play a game. He asked me to write down everything I loved and valued in life, and he would do the same. We would exchange lists and discuss what was important to us. I wrote about my family, my friends, my hobbies, and other meaningful aspects of my life. When I handed my list to Leo, he requested that I include specific names, my closest friends and family members. He said he would do the same. I complied, writing down the names of my nearest and dearest. One afternoon, while we were hanging out in class, Leo made an odd request. He asked if he could show me something but insisted I couldn't tell anyone, or there would be consequences. I was puzzled and wondered if he might be about to confess his feelings for me. The request seemed strange, but I agreed to see what he wanted to show me. Leo reached into his backpack and pulled out a Ziploc bag. At first, I couldn't see what was inside. When he placed the bag on the desk, I realized it was filled with hair. My hair, he claimed. My heart skipped a beat. I was confused and scared, unable to understand why he had it. Leo then rolled up his sleeve, revealing a series of fresh knife scars on his arm. The scars were lined up, some still bleeding. He took a handful of my hair and pressed it onto one of the open wounds. His voice was chillingly cold as he said, "You belong to me now. I know everything about you, who you love and what you care about. If you don't do what I say, there will be consequences. These scars are my debts. Think of me whenever something happens to you." My heart raced and a wave of fear washed over me. I felt a mix of panic and disbelief. I couldn't stay in that classroom any longer. I bolted out of the room, tears streaming down my face, and ran straight to the school office. I was desperate and asked to see my counselor immediately. I relayed every detail of the horrifying encounter. The staff reacted swiftly, taking my concerns seriously. Leo was removed from class and taken to the principal's office. The school authorities found disturbing evidence in his backpack, notes from various people, including mine, and the scars on his arm. Leo was expelled from school that day, but the ordeal didn't end there. The school never provided details on what happened to him afterward, and his background remained a mystery. It was as if he had vanished. I never saw or heard from him again. The situation was left unresolved, and I was left with lingering questions about what had motivated Leo and if he had any further plans. The aftermath of the incident was unsettling. I tried to go back to my normal routine, but the fear from that day never fully left me. The memory of Leo and his strange behavior haunted me, and the incident became a dark chapter of my high school years. Despite the support I received from the school and friends, the mystery of Leo's true intentions and what might have happened to him remained unanswered. The most bizarre part of this experience was how quickly it seemed like Leo had never existed. It was as if he was erased from everyone's memory. No one seemed to remember him, including the teachers. I often wondered if he was part of something more sinister, or if there was another layer to his actions that never came to light. To this day, I find myself questioning the entire episode. Was Leo genuinely dangerous, or was he just playing a disturbing game? Why did he keep my hair, and what were the scars on his arm supposed to represent? The uncertainty of it all left me with more questions than answers. The fear and confusion from that day continue to linger, and I'm left with a chilling reminder of how quickly things can spiral out of control. This story is one I rarely share, but it remains a significant and unsettling part of my life. It's a reminder of how quickly normalcy can turn into something frightening, and how some mysteries are never fully explained. The experience with Leo is a haunting chapter, leaving me with a sense of unease and a lingering sense of what might have been. Growing up in a small town, I was used to a tight-knit community where everyone knew everyone. I wasn't exactly a social butterfly and had my share of bullies, but there was one kid who stood out: Max. He was small, with round glasses and slicked-back hair, the kind of kid you'd imagine from an old movie playing a stereotypical nerd. Max kept to himself and avoided interactions whenever possible. In 8th grade, fate paired us as lab partners for the year. I was a nice person by nature, so I was determined to be friendly. Max was shy and reserved, but he did his part in our lab work. The year went by smoothly, and we got along well enough even though our interactions were minimal. When 9th grade rolled around, I moved to a new town with my mother due to issues with my birth father. I started at a new school, which was daunting. Despite missing my old friends, I made new ones and settled into my new life. My mom often drove me back to visit my old friends, and eventually, I got my own license, which made things easier. Max faded from my memory, a distant part of my past. That changed in my junior year. I began dating a guy named Jack from my old town, and he asked me to prom. I was thrilled to spend the evening with him and my childhood friends. A few months before the event, my mom mentioned that a new coworker had inquired about me because her grandson Max was seeing me and wanted to know what I looked like. My mom showed her a picture, and the coworker went on her way. Later, the coworker asked for the color of my prom dress to coordinate Max's outfit. My mom was puzzled, but told her it was pink. As prom approached, I heard from some hometown friends that Max had been telling people we were going together and was excited about it. It felt off, but I brushed it aside. On prom night, I picked up Jack, and we arrived at the school to find Max and his grandmother waiting outside to take pictures. I reluctantly posed for a few photos with Max while Jack stood by. Max's grandmother didn't seem fazed by the fact that I had a different date. The rest of the evening went well with Jack, and we didn't see Max again. After that night, I didn't hear much from Max except for his grandmother trying to get my number from my mom, which she wisely refused. When I went to state college, I learned that Max had enrolled in a prestigious private university. It was a surprise when I ran into him on campus one day. I was polite, asked if he was a student here too, and chatted briefly before heading to class. It was a brief, unsettling encounter. Over the next few months, Max appeared almost daily. He always seemed eager to talk and never was with anyone else. I learned from dorm mates that Max had been asking around about me, trying to find out my class schedule and claiming we were together. He even said he turned down a scholarship to be close to me. My friends figured out his lies when they never saw us together and stopped engaging with him. I decided to move home and switch schools, but I didn't tell Max. A year later, I married my high school boyfriend. Shortly after, we attended a fair in a nearby town. While walking around, I noticed Max staring at us from across the street. His gaze was filled with anger, and it was the first time I felt truly scared of him. I tried to ignore him, but he kept appearing, always with that menacing look. The years passed with no contact from Max. I didn't know if he still lived nearby until I started working at a local clothing store. Max would occasionally come in and sit in the waiting area with his sister. He'd stare at me from his seat, which made me uncomfortable. I mentioned this to my manager, but he shrugged it off, assuming Max was just hanging out. In my mid-20s, I moved to a city several hours away. I settled into my new life and was doing well. The only connection to Max was a random Facebook friend request, which I ignored. I hope it stays that way, as I've had enough of his unsettling presence in my life.